I present a personal account about my life as a person with Asperger's syndrome, focusing on my activity, volunteering activity in many fields, above all in the field of autism. This year is the European Year of Voluntary Activities, declared by Council of European Union. Voluntary activity is a big part of my life, very important. So I wanted to talk to you about volunteering activity. I started my volunteering activity 15 years ago. I'm 40 years old age. When I was young, I never think to do volunteer activities. It was too hard for me to help other people or to interact, to communicate. These are characteristics that you know for autistic spectrum condition. But I started to make volunteering activities. I like it. I discovered that a lot of people in autism spectrum condition make volunteering activities, giving personal accounts in conferences, entering in organizations or families, or participating in communities, self-advocacy groups. I love to channel Mark Segar, a British boy with Asperger's syndrome, famous for his book Coping, a Survival Guide for People with Asperger's Syndrome. He was a volunteer also in Africa. I declare my conflicts of interest. I'm a member of Council of Administration of Autism Europe. I am Vice President of an Italian Association of Families about Asperger's syndrome. My organization is involved with other in Italy in a federation, Fantasia. I am member of a cooperative of work, LEM, a cooperative formed by Asperger people, of a member of a local association in Italy. My diagnosis arrived only 5 years ago, when I was an adult. I was born 40 years ago. At that time there were no diagnostic tools for Asperger's syndrome. So all my life I lived without awareness, without help. My traits were mild. I was a shy child. During my childhood, I didn't make friends with easy. I played always with myself or my sisters. I had difficulty to play with other children. In kindergarten, I never talked to other children or my nursery school teacher, only to my sister. One day my school teacher followed me and my mother to my house to listen at the door and to notice, to discover that I spoke in my home but not in school. During free time I was with my father, friends of my father. When I was a child I was in company of adult people, not with other children. Difficulty about relatives, I was in not that easy with relatives visits and social situations in general. I played with my sisters, but when they growed, I remained lonely in my home. In the first form, I didn't talk to my school teacher nor with my classmates. School teacher asked to say good morning when I enter to the class, but I didn't. She forced me to say. I stayed at the entrance without saying good morning. So after a long time I get in. Time by time I started to interact, to speak at the teacher and the classmates, and it was hard for me to understand the meaning of the school, why I have to go to school, I have to study. It was hard for me to understand. I started to study with the passion in the third form when I was 8 old year. It was very interesting for me to study grammar, Italian grammar, in a schematic way. In general, other classmates isolated me in many situations. Was difficult to interact with them. After the school, during summer, it was difficult for me to know other children, to make friends. In the middle school, the hardest period of my life, transition from private primary school to public middle school was traumatic. Children very lively. I was a victim of bullying. I didn't know how to stop them and why they were so bad with me. Studying was not a problem in middle school. My classmates searched for me to copy my homeworks. And it was very important for me to save one classmate from primary school. So he represented for me a bridge between me and the others. Adolescence is a hard period of life for everyone, above all for Asperger's syndrome people. My interest was encyclopedias, atlases, not football or stickers. I started to use computers to program in assembly. I explain shortly my experience in senior higher school. I've written one chapter in this book, only in Italian. I'm sorry. This book with a lot of personal accounts about school and university. Me and my desk, I have now a lot of photo during senior high school, but it is very significant because I was always on my desk during lesson, but also during break, every situation. My classmates during break exit the class to go in the coffee bar or other classes, but I stayed there sit down in my desk because I was at easy in my desk and not comfortable in other situations, informal situations. My interest at that time was cars, but very intensive interest because I studied every model of car in the market, creating a lot of tables of technical data. During oral test, I spoke without looking in the eyes the teacher with a monotonous tone. One day my teacher said me, "Why don't you look at me while I test you orally? You always look under your desk. Maybe you have written on pieces of paper what you have to say because you have not studied." It was strange for me to discover that it is an important thing to look at the other when I speak. I cannot in that time to look in the eyes the other person. It's what terrible because I have studied every time. It's not a situation where I have to read a piece, but a difficulty to watch at the teacher. I was 16 years old. Another problem, my arrival time. I was always late. I received a lot of reproachfully reprimand notes, but they didn't get a result because my problem was to manage my time in my house when I was preparing for exiting, to prepare, to eat, to dress, to wash. They reprimand not didn't solve it. There were bullying episodes also in higher school. I made a school trip. It was uncomfortable because, like other informal situation, is difficult to manage, to understand the social rules. I saw, for example, other students sending postcards to their family. Why to send a postcard to my family? They know I am there. They paid for me for being there. Why to write? So I wrote only goodbye. Depression. When I was 17 years old, I felt in depression because I started to recognize my difficulties to confront my situation and other boys in my class. It was hard, but after some months I exited my depression. A lot of problem with my father. My father was a passionate, chatty, very passionate man. He wanted me to become like him, but it was too hard for me to emulate my father, and a lot of problem of communication with him. I started university studying engineering. In the first years I passed the exams, but the problem was to manage my time, to manage my study. The first years I studied together my friends, but passing time they changed the courses, so I found myself alone. It was very difficult to manage university. Girls, a lot of difficulties with the girls. I did not know what to say or to do. A very distress, a lot of distress. So when I studied in university alone, I focused extremely on details. I spent weeks to study only one equation to understand it without the need. My teacher never need my study of these details, so I waste my time in too much details. So after I stopped my study in university because it was very difficult to manage alone my study. This is a party with my friends, an informal moment. Was hard to me to interact, to talk with the others. In summer holidays, my friends very interested in girls. We went in dancing in discotheque. For me, the discotheque is a place where we go to dance, but I discovered only after that people go there to meet people. It was difficult for me to understand why to go in a place to dance without dancing. Volunteering. I started volunteering activity in 1998 with an international organization. This was a very important aspect because I stayed in touch with a lot of people. I started to interact with a lot of people, and above all, these people was sensible, and they helped me to improve my virtues, pass my difficulties. A At that time, my new passion was computer science. I stopped to study engineering, and I was every time always on my computer. And then I become a software developer. A computer company found me. I started to work employed in this company as a programmer. My volunteering activity, I was involved in travels to Africa. I like very much Africa because it's very easy to interact, to communicate with African people, and I used my virtues. I was responsible for computer literacy. I opened an internet center. I was eccentric in Africa too, in a very formal meeting. I dressed a local traditional dress in Africa, but the other African people dressed normally. I turned my difficulties into strengths. For example, the food. In Africa you can eat only a few types of foods. You have not a great choice, so you have to eat every day the same things. For me it's not a problem because I like very much rice. You can eat rice without problems, but my Italian friends after only 1 week they suffer for very much. They need Italian food. They wanted to come back to Italy to meet their friends, their family. But I was focused on my project. I worked also my longest travel was 2 months in Africa. Volunteering activities very important for my life because I started the personal transformation with these projects. This allowed me to know me better than before, to observe myself, I learned to observe the others and myself, to express my emotions and to perceive the others' emotion. But sometimes I still wrong to understand the others. About my work in the computer company, my work was very interesting because it was coincident with my passion about programming and about computers. But difficulty with teamwork, with the relation with my chief, and my odd behavior. One day I arrived in the office with a Togolese African traditional dress, and the others underlined that I was in the wrong, I dressed in the wrong way. So the diagnosis arrived in 2006. I read a book by Jutta Fritt, and then I found very similar traits for me, and I went to my physician. I went to public health service to receive a diagnosis. But in Italy, to receive a diagnosis for adult people in autism spectrum is very difficult. You can find a center for children, but for adults it's very hard. A lot of obstacles. Awareness is a great aspect. It can open my future. I can recognize my difficulties. I can link all my difficulties to work to overcome them. A little parenthesis about neurotypicals. Neurotypicals are good for communicating, for interacting, for sharing their interest with others, but I don't want to generalize, but neurotypical people is a liar, inaccurate, is not objective, is very conditioned by they are to tell me something of personal. They don't use a direct speak, but they use a strange and a source of misunderstanding way. I don't know why, but I have to interact in this way with them. I think you know very much a lot of books of Asperger people about biography, but there are not so many books about how Asperger people can understand neurotypical world. Mark Segar wrote this book. Now my volunteering activity in the field of autism. After my diagnosis, I soon participated in a National Association of Families, Group Asperger. Was very important for me to compare myself with other people with Asperger syndrome. It is like to watch me in the mirror. It's very difficult to observe myself, but to observe another people similar to you is easier. I am comfortable with other Asperger people. Our association is born in 2003. At that time in Italy there were not knowledge about Asperger syndrome and about autism in general. Then we created opportunities, conferences to spread this condition, information about this condition. We have a lot of activities. We use websites, mailing list. We publish books, training. We organize seminars, conferences. This is our website. This is our Facebook page. This is a group of Facebook. Do you know the difference of group and page? A group is a set of Facebook profiles of people. A page is an official page. Our books, only in Italian, I'm sorry. Our tools, we created a different mailing list for parents, educators, and people with Asperger's syndrome above 18 years old, to get out of isolation and to share experience, to exchange information. For example, I joined this mailing list Asperger IT to know the other Italian people with Asperger syndrome. I started to make a friend, to meet, and then I started the projects with them. This is an institutional activity of our organization with the Ministry of Health 4 years ago. This is Fantasia, is an abbreviation for National Federation of Associations for people with autism or Asperger syndrome, because in Italy we have a lot of organizations of families. Website. During this year, Italian Senate approved the motion about autism with a lot of contribution of this organization, federation. Also, for the first time, our Italian National Institute for Health is publishing the first guideline about autism, because until now we have no national guidelines about autism. I speak about our cooperative work, LEM, Laboratory of Multimedia Exploration, a cooperative composed by people with Asperger's syndrome. We use our skills to start to work on projects. For example, our skills to translate for books, to create websites, to use a computer in general. Our products is not easy to work, but I can compare this work with my experience in computer company. In computer company, there is always a competition with my colleagues, with superiors, bullying, problem with the chief. In our cooperative, there are no similar problems, but we still have other problems to work in team, to express our difficulties to the others. We have produced a lot of things during these years. This is a local organization in Italy, in Milan. There is a meeting place for people with Asperger's syndrome. They can feel at ease, they can meet friends, they can grow their interest and participate in projects in an appropriate environment. This is a role-playing game. There are many interests in every Asperger people is different from the other. I know a lot of people, and everyone is different from the other, and every person have a passion, an interest about board games or cinema or movies or TV, and they can share their interest in this place with the others. This is my town, Rome, a project about cinema. We meet in a cinema in a private session to share, to view the movie, to speak, to interact with the help of psychologists. Everyone choose a movie, then prepare a description or a review about this movie to present, and after we can discuss the film, what we think about the film, and to express our feelings. It's not easy to participate to the debate, but with the help of psychologists we can improve our interaction. Another project, we made a documentary video about a part of our town. Everyone participated as an interviewer or videographer or technician, or everyone participated. It was very hard to collaborate and to understand the difficulties of the others, and also when, for example, I understood the difficulty of the other, I found it very hard to understand how to help him or her. Since 2007 I started to give my personal accounts to increase awareness, to increase information about Asperger syndrome to professionals, to institutions, to general public. Coming out is a problem because I wanted to choose when I wanted to explain my Asperger syndrome condition to another people. I want to choose when to do, how to do, to who. I wanted to choose to who I wanted to disclose my situation, because there is no information about Asperger syndrome in general population, and it's easy to become a victim of prejudice or discrimination in general. I became vice president 3 years ago. For a lot of reasons, started again my study in university. I changed the faculty, choosing information technology, but there were problems another time, because it's very difficult for me to manage my time. I am to be a student, to be a worker, to be a volunteer, and finally I gave up again. There is a lot of changes in university in Italy. I studied 20 years ago. In 20 years, a lot of changes. Now every course is on internet with a page. Teacher sends lessons by email, but the rhythm of study is become frenetic. It's very difficult to be a student and to be a worker simultaneously. 2 years ago, I participated in my first social skills group. I wanted to participate in a similar social skill group when I was young, but because it is very useful when you are young. But when I was younger, there were no opportunities for me for such groups. Another project, social theater, very funny. Another group last year, affectivity and sexuality education, with 3 psychologists, based on this book by Isabelle Leno, a Canadian sexologist and psychologist. I think you know the 2nd of April is World Autism Awareness Day. This is an event we organized in Turin, a review about movies dedicated to autism with characters in the movie with Asperger or autism condition. Another project is about sport. Let's move on. We practice athletics in Olympic Stadium, where there are a lot of people every day to make a sport, and we can develop educational aspects, sporting aspects, and also relational, social, communicative, and so on. The next Sunday, the 2nd of October, is the World Day of Non-Violence. I take part in volunteering activity, organizing a foot race, and I'm involving also Asperger people that are attending our project of athletics. Since last year I joined Autism Europe. I'm a member of Council of Administration. On December I participated to European Conference on Disability by European Commission with Aurelie. Autism Europe is our websites, our Facebook page, official page, and finally me in a social network. For personal use, I don't use Facebook. I prefer another social group, Google Plus, because you can separate your friends by circles, like your life, real life, because you share something with your family, other things with your friends, other things with your colleagues. I finished.
Thank you very much, Pietro. Any questions? Vprašanje kakšno za Pietro?
Hello, I'm from Romania and have Asperger's syndrome too. I identified myself many of the things you said you experienced. So I'd like to ask if prejudice against people who cannot keep the normal social pace in many domains of activity, in running away from the family, in growing up, is there still discrimination at official levels? Because I understood there was a once very sensitive word uttered by the Prime Minister who says bamboccioni. Bamboccioni, which means grown-up child who became a burden on society and destroyed the business of, don't know exactly what he meant, but I understood there was a heavy debate on this. And what's the situation now, how the country really perceives this?
In my country, in Italy, there is a big problem. In general, about economic crisis, our government started to cut every service to disability people in general, not only to autistic people, but every disability person now has a problem to attend the school, because in Italy we have a mainstream school for all. We have inclusive school, but we need special teachers in each class to help particular needs of disabled people or autistic child. Our government is cutting money, and so we have lesser and lesser special teachers, and also for health services. A lot of organizations, national organization of families in Italy are fighting against this cut. It's a very difficult moment. But there is no reason to cut, because autistic people and also disabled people in general are a resource, because if you don't give education or support in adult age, these people will be not independent, and a very huge need every day for everything. We need to become more and more independent. We need an help starting from adolescence, when you are young. I think this situation is similar in many countries, but in Italy we are very worried about it.
Še kakšno vprašanje? Potem pa thank you, Pietro, once again.